6 years. Hi everyone, I'm Karen Alter. I'm CEO at Borshoff, and I'm excited to be here for this episode of ShoffChats. I have two exciting guests here today with me. First, my business partner, Catherine Coble, and also Nikki Lewallen Gregory. Nikki is the founder and Chief Meaningful Work Officer for the People Forward Network. So welcome to the show.
Yes.
So happy to be here with both of you guys.
Yeah.
So we have a really exciting topic today around this concept of people first workplaces and how we build those, how we sustain those. And I think to get us started, Nikki, I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about your personal story, your journey to where you are today. Congrats on People Forward Network, 2 years now, celebrating. And so maybe talk a little bit about why people first, why people forward, why those concepts are so meaningful to you and why they resonate so much with our workforce across the world, essentially.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take you back to when I was 7, but I promise I'll tell this in like 3 minutes.
I love it.
As a child, I had 2 wonderful parents. They're still married today that set so many wonderful, wonderful blueprint in our lives. But They worked a lot, and they work to them was, I remember my mom used to call it the rat race. And she would be living for the weekend. Mondays were dreaded. Can't wait till the next vacation. She did like her work, but she never had that, what we call today maybe work-life harmony or work-life integration. Mm-hmm. My dad, very similar in a different, my mom was in an executive role. My dad worked in more of a manufacturing role. Sure. And every day would have to get up really early, and we had just very little time with our parents. And I saw that growing up, and just when I got out of my first internship, it was in an EAP, an employee assistance program. And I remember the light bulb went off when it said, employers pay us to help their employees have work-life balance. That's what it was called back then. And I was like, what? And it just hit a light bulb for me that employers pay for work-life balance. And as you look down at the details, it was like, if someone is going through, hardships with their children, if they're wanting to get better as people, if they are going through divorce, the employer pays to be able to help them to get better and just be a better person. And it just struck a chord with me. I was like, I've never even heard of this. That was my very first job outside of working in restaurants, going through college and all of that. And I was like, I want to work on this mission forever, because I believe that, when we at work are fulfilled and just see it as an extension of our life, everything else flows. You have energy to go and volunteer in your community or do more with your kids because work is fulfilling. So that was kind of how it started.
I love that. And so it's really a personal journey for you. It's been something that and I know you have kind of a personal mission statement. What is that? Having to do with Mondays.
Loving Mondays.
Loving Mondays,
so
right.
I actually used to have a little show on that and weekly little inspiration tips, because I believe, leaders help their people love Mondays, but people help themselves love Mondays too. It's a twofold. And yes.
So take me back. I know we had coffee at the Food Emporium up near Butler.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And we were talking about this topic. And excuse me, you were kind of in a position where you were trying to figure out your next step and really align your passions. And so maybe talk about that day and that genesis of how that became People Forward Network, and maybe a little bit about the People Forward Network, just for our audience.
So at that time, I was working with a software company that helped employees feel recognized.
Yeah.
And so it was a very powerful mission. I would say if I looked at a scale of 1 to 10, I may have been living about a 7. The impact of what the software did was really awesome, but there were some missing pieces, and I'm like, I am not my whole self. I am not bringing all of my energy. I love to have energy.
And I remember you came and talked to Catherine and me about that software at one point.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And great software. And but I reached out to a couple of mentors that I just look up to. You were one of those, and said, I just want to have coffee and just kind of challenge myself, because if for years I have been encouraging people to live their 10 in their work, and I'm not,
and I'm not doing it.
This is really inauthentic, and I knew that there was more. And so, we had coffee that day, and it wasn't that I was in a complete disaster. It was I'm challenging myself to do what I want to do for other people. And so had no idea yet on People Forward Network. But one thing that I was doing at the time was podcasting. That started for me 6 years ago. I was in my 6th year of that, and really found that, looking at what I love to do, podcasting does 2 things in the niche space that I love. It builds relationships, which I feel like relationships trump everything.
I totally agree.
Build your business, solve a problem, relationships, right? And the other side is leveraging a podcast to the Loving Mondays, right?
Yeah.
To be able to share the content that inspires other people. And so went out and looked for a number of partners that were also passionate, and we launched a consortium of shows that are now here. It wasn't here then. It was one show then. But we've launched a number of niche shows that really speak to all different types of people leaders to help them on their journey and inspire people to own their 50.
Take their action.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm a big fan. I listen to a lot of the podcasts. Anytime you send an invitation for anything, I usually register. I pass it on to my colleagues, and I think it's such a great network.
Yes, one of the things that I know is podcasts are just becoming even more and more popular these days. Yeah. I've heard a statistic that it's really the number one method of people consuming content now compared to video or the written word.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for all the things that have happened that's got us to this place. That 6 years ago, I had no idea. I was just like, this builds relationships, and this is an amplifier for messaging that people need to hear. Now, and I think COVID really sped this up, because people started to value more of their work-life harmony or integration. I'm going to move my body and consume content, not just sit in an office space or be on a screen. That, audio became our most applicable way that we can multitask in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. So it truly is the number one way that human beings across all generations consume content.
I know for me personally, it was walking, because during the pandemic, that walking was kind of my exercise, and I started doing podcasts at that point.
Yeah.
We all wanted to get so much fresh air too.
Exactly, the fresh air component,
Right. Totally.
Well, I also think there's this element to audio that's just a little bit different in that it's there's this sense of authenticity that comes across. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, and how's that impacted some of the podcasts that are part of your network?
I do. I believe that strongly, that we're able to build relationship through the emotion and the transparency and vulnerability that people share through their stories. And I think sometimes, you can do that through video as well, but you think about sometimes with video, if you're really wanting to impact more of the masses, you might not be able to reach them because they're driving. They can't sit there and watch the video. So it's really the audio message, even in the video, that is connecting. And I think that's a lot through how we storytell, how we transparently communicate. I often like to share, I don't know if either of you are Mel Robbins fans, if you listen to the Mel Robbins podcast, but I was like, she's like my bestie. She's never met me, but she always signs off every podcast that, hey friends, love you friends, whatever. I'm like, I feel like she's my friend.
It's exciting. Well, and we're communications experts. I mean, that's Borshoff's business. And I think that's such a huge, podcasting as a way of communicating with, from a CEO or a, business owner aspect to its employees, and then engaging those employees. So there is kind of this cyclical benefit of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and you think about how often communication and the written word is missed. How many emails do we all get? Anyone that we would ever ask? It's like, stop with the emails. But if you, let's say you work in one state different from where maybe home office is, or wherever maybe the CEO is, and you've read a lot of emails, you've seen some pieces about them, but you get to, on the mobile device, that 92% of us after you're 12 years old in the United States, 92% of us have a smartphone device. That's crazy, right?
That's crazy.
So, but to look at, I can click this button and it feels personal to me that Karen is talking to me.
Yes.
And if she's a good storyteller and she's telling me transparently, or even in the toughest of seasons of business, she is explaining why we had to let a couple people go. And it was really hard. And otherwise, you, through the rumor mill and the telephone game, you hear things and you make stuff up, right? But you get this personal communication from your CEO about even hardships or exciting things. It's
and I think I've been listened to a couple of podcasts where have actually brought me to tears.
True.
And back to that personal connection that you feel with that person, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so heartfelt.
Totally.
Now, for these Catherine. Internal, and the ones you're talking about, like using a podcast within an internal organization.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more. I'm curious what you think about the use of that from a CEO perspective, and is it mostly for companies that are larger in nature that is a good method for communication?
And I will say we're still very much learning.
Yeah.
So 6 years ago, started podcasting. For about 5 years, did external podcasts. So more working with, partners that serve these leaders and these people on a meaningful work journey. And then in the past year, we've been learning all the things we learned, how do we apply this internal? Well, if you think about I believe, and you two are the experts too, so I'm curious where you think, you think about what is the crux that really activates a great people first workplace. I think of two things: the communication, the communication we share, and the relationships we build. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else that even is close to that. And so if you think about from your question of how would a CEO use this, many times, and I would say in mid-market or enterprise companies is typically where we've seen the popularity of this. Not always, but you look at the perception of the executive team versus really who they are as a human. And you have a lot of employees, and how do you make a meaningful deposit with each and every one, a scalable relationship with all of them? It's nearly impossible, but there's ways, that you can help that. And I really think the podcasting is a way for CEOs and executives to share transparently and have messages that might make you cry, that really help to build a relationship. I think there's a lot of other things that we've learned are so helpful too, providing an on-demand opportunity for the workplaces that have many different shifts. It's man, we can never get everybody together. Well, let's give it on demand and let's have a deadline that we're asking everybody to listen to it. Somebody wants to listen to it at night because they're a night owl, or in the morning, or driving, right? So giving that flexibility and inspiring work-life integration for your people. Hey, you just joined, let's say Borshoff, or whatever company it is, and let's say before, someone's sitting there for 20 hours watching videos or whatever at their screen, or in these Zoom rooms or whatever. What if we could hybrid that? Yeah. And it's some of that's going to be with all of us, and then some of that is going to be on your own time. Go find your favorite chair. Go find your favorite trail, right? So there's a lot of different components. The one other I'll mention, giving employees a voice. So giving employees a voice is something that we are advocating for big time, because when you have a workplace that says they're people first, or they're trying to be people first, but it's really not there. We've all seen that, where there's a very different perception from the leadership team than what is reality. If you launch a show and it's the executive team talking, it's not gonna work. Yeah. We've seen that.
It's one way versus
yeah.
So then, are you saying, for example, if you start a company podcast, that you should have employees from all levels actually on the podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, so powerful, because think if you look at key stakeholders or champions inside of a company, what are you looking for them to champion? One is why I love to work here, right? Yeah. And sharing that with other people. Maybe somebody else is why I love this program that we launched, and their passion. You lean into people's passion and figure out who is the person to amplify that, or to teach us things that we don't know about other departments, right? And we start there, and it's to drive adoption. You can see a lot more adoption happening because they want to hear and they want to meet peers. Yeah. But if you don't feel comfortable and trusting of your leadership team, you launch a podcast and you start with them, it's not probably going to have the best stats. So,
there's actually, I saw an interesting statistic recently that said 69% of managers are uncomfortable talking to their employees, communicating. But yet that's such an important part of being a manager.
Yeah.
How do you think that something like this could help them overcome that kind of a fear or discomfort?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't think I've heard exactly that statistic, but that scares me.
That scares me too.
Because you also think, what's the number one reason why people leave? Statistically,
because they haven't spoken to their leader.
Right. Yeah. So I'm the way I think about it is, for those 69%, let's say all leaders, we need to prioritize relationship building skills. That has to be there before any communication strategy or tactic is going to work, because, it's okay, these 3 steps for communication, but you don't know how to connect with people.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to work. So it's a scary statistic. And I would say what podcasting would do then is, because that's the outcome we're trying to create, our great episodes with them, we need some training here. We need to prioritize how we're relationship building and communicating before we do this, so that we actually have statistics that are good. Because that's the outcome we're going to get measured on.
Right.
How many people actually listened? And there's a lot of data to help, gauge the success from there.
Yeah, so, I've been working for many years. I won't say how many because then you can guess my age. But I've been working for many years, and I think a lot of the model before today, maybe before pandemic, right, was top-down communication, where it was the executives giving employees information, and there wasn't always that opportunity to provide that feedback. And I feel like that's what this has done for us with, podcasting being a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Where now there is more two-way. Now there is a seat at the table, if you will, where we can have a place for more authentic conversations.
Yeah.
Everything used to be felt very scripted and very messaged. And that's something that we pride ourselves in too, as well as a communications agency. But at the same time, really having that fluid, transparent, let's be vulnerable.
Yes.
What's that trust basis? I think is such a huge piece of this people first workplace.
Yeah, totally. And I think you said something that we hear nearly any company say they want and can't figure out is two-way communication.
The two-way.
How do we get that? And so in a couple of examples here, just kind of play this out, what we've seen so far is, okay, you have a private podcast for your internal efforts. Mm-hmm. You plug that private podcast to activate it into the medium that is working for you. Mm-hmm. Let's call it Slack. I'm a huge Slack fan. Love it. Mm-hmm. You can create these Slack groups, right, that are based on topic to associate with like the podcast theme. So any podcast is going to have like core pillars of topics. Like let's say one is like updates, right. Two is, employee spotlights or whatever that is. Then you have channels where people can then chime in. And at the end of that episode or during the episode, you're like, hey, chime in on the employee chat channel or whatever that's called, so that we're all sharing in that and, building a muscle for people to feel comfortable. That's another thing.
It's that safe space.
Yeah. Right.
Piece and the culture piece, right? Like building a culture where people feel like it's okay to speak up or ask a question even.
Yeah. Right.
So Nikki, so talking about those internal ones and putting them in those internal channels, I've actually heard of some employers who have an internal podcast, but they're putting it out into the world. So really anyone can hear.
Yeah.
And they're kind of hearing, it's almost like they're being invited into what used to be more of a private staff meeting.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
And is that wise?
I admire that. There was a company
that's transparent.
That is transparent. One of the first big brand shows that we looked at to learn from was American Airlines. And that's how from everything I know, I don't think they do any like closed private episodes that aren't external. But it was fascinating to know that that's how American Airlines is connecting with all their people. And you're like, oh, that sounds perfect because you got people in the air, on the ground, right? But then that they said, we don't have anything to hide. We want it all the spotlight to be on our people. We want to share the news that we have because we want you to embrace us as the loyal brand that you fly with.
Right.
Another example, we're sitting in Indianapolis right now. Local to Indianapolis is Peterman Brothers. So an HVAC plumbing company, that they have done that since day one. Chad Peterman, their CEO, started a podcast to do their internal communication and said, why would we hide it from anybody? Let's just throw it out there. And if you ask him why, he said, Can't Stop the Growth is his coined term, his first book and his podcast. But he's like, if we're learning things about growing people and growing business, why wouldn't I want to share it?
Why wouldn't I want to share that?
Yeah.
That's a great philosophy. Yeah.
Great for recruiting purposes.
Yeah, for sure.
And the brand. Really see inside the company that they might want to potentially join.
Right. So I would say, personally, if I was running a large organization with employees, I would probably do a hybrid approach from the standpoint of there's not much we need to hide or want to hide. We want to be transparent. We want to share our customer stories. We want our employees out there, give them a spotlight, tell how great they are. Other people hear their story and want to work here. Absolutely. But there might be times where there are needs for more like private conversation that people would feel is not necessarily for the external.
Proprietary.
Yeah. And that they might want to, like, as a team, hear a version from someone that then is an angle that they're not going to share externally that fires them up to want to share their perspective. Right. So I think I like the hybrid. I would say maybe 75-25 feels really good
the
to
new
me.
word.
Yeah.
The new word
even
for
for
everything.
podcasting.
Exactly. So this whole concept of people first, do you think that was amplified because of the pandemic, or was it a movement that was kind of happening, from where you sit, was that kind of happening before then, and then the pandemic just blew it up?
So I love getting into the nitty gritty or like nerding out, but I'm not that type of person. So there are so many people that speak on this different than I do. But how I would break it down is, I think that we were on a journey with the younger generations. You see statistics around the younger generation saying like, I value my life and my time, and like work is not the number one thing. I would love work to be an extension of just who I am, so it doesn't even feel like work.
Right.
But that is the couple of generations at the bottom right now, and I think that shaped it. And then I think when we really had a strong market for the candidate, right? And it's like you just got choices, right? And it forced the employers to level up, because somebody's going to walk out your door at any time because of just where the economy was.
Yeah, you either had to jump in or you were going to start falling behind, I think.
Right. And then I think with all of that, COVID also showed us just the many different opportunities of like gig economy and extreme flexibility, and people were forced to live a different way and are like, wait, I never thought about work this way. I could work from home, and maybe that fits better for their life or whatever. So I think it's a number of things. Generation, COVID.
Do you think people are feeling, like employees specifically, do you think employees, and maybe Catherine, you have a perspective on this, are feeling more engaged now? Like, are we back into this where people are kind of finding their passions again, and they're getting aligned with the meaningful work that they want to do, and they're feeling these better connections with their companies? Are we there yet? No. Yeah.
I just continue
you agree.
I mean, all the research is showing that engagement is still super, super low.
Yeah.
That even managers aren't engaged. So if the manager is really the first line of communication and empowerment and motivation, and they're not engaged, we can't really expect the workforce to be engaged either. So we've got a lot of work to do, I think.
Yeah, a lot of work to do. I think there's a shift coming. I think that, we were all the way over here, and then this forced, change of a lot of things, COVID was the force. And now it's kind of understanding, the non-forced learnings. And so I think, but the statistics have not changed a lot. And I would say that the number one from the research I read and just where my heart and soul believes is the disconnect of humanity, like people. And people, like, where maybe a workplace is all remote now.
Isolation.
Or leaders not knowing, or the statistic about managers, not knowing how to build relationships. If we did relationship building training for every leader and employee, like if that was just like the whole world's going to focus on this, I would bet that those statistics would change drastically. I feel like that is the chess move, the trump card, the whatever you want to call it, that would change things.
Yeah.
So totally to that point, we've actually been working on developing a manager training, because we really see this gap in the marketplace where there is managers aren't, those frontline supervisors is mostly what I'm talking about. They don't really see or embrace their role as a communicator, and so they're not doing it very well. But it's something that can definitely be a learned skill, but it starts with relationship. And so this training that we're doing isn't even a how can I be a better public speaker type of a training. That's not what it is. It's much more about this idea of how do I make connections with people? How do I show people that I care? Because if I can do that through good communication, we're going to have much better productivity. We're going to have much better collaboration. We're going to actually get the job done that we're all trying to do, and we're all going to feel good about it.
Totally. And something that you just said made me think I should make a point here about how do you practice good relationship building in any form? It's how we communicate.
It's communication.
Verbal, nonverbal, whatever. It's like prioritizing relationships. The skill set is like how we communicate to advance that. So it's this nucleus in the center.
And I think communication can also be listening and asking good questions, right? Because I feel like sometimes with managers or people at the executive level, they come to a conversation with an opinion. I mean, that's what we get paid for, right? To like make big decisions and have great opinions. But when you're trying to connect with someone, it's more or less that let's be vulnerable together. Let's share this space. Let's get on the same human level and just chat and learn about each other. Because I think we can start putting up walls if you try to have this persona.
Yeah. I was just on a webinar session at a conference that I spoke at just a couple days ago. And there was, before I hopped on, there was a speaker, and they were talking about, leadership communication that really sticks, what stands in the way. And all these people were chatting in, and 75% honesty. That was the answer. And it's like, okay, well, obviously it's a problem.
Did we learn that in kindergarten, I think?
Yeah.
Be honest.
Yeah. But if we even have to say that,
I know,
right?
that's crazy.
And so it's like, I think the takeaway there is, why are we posturing? Like, why, everything's positioned and postured and whatever, versus like, can I just lean into like what's happening here and what we strive to do? And here are our core values, and we did mess up, but we are working on this to fix it. And we want you to come alongside. Like but there's all this posture, and 75% of those people are like, that's what's wrong. And that's what's happening.
Well, we did it, we're a smaller company. And so and we're communications experts, like I said before, but sometimes that's one of the things that we fall short on ourselves. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find strike that right balance. But we did a survey of our employees, and having open, honest communication was one of the things they wrote, almost, I think 92% or something of our employees said, we need more of that.
Yeah.
So here it can even happen, in a company that's our expertise.
Yeah, sure.
Let alone a large corporation or like a Peterman Brothers that's got a lot of people in different shifts and different things.
I do want to comment on that though, because I think like if, most people that, we're talking about, these leaders that really care about people first, or they're interested.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of that is not at all intentional. It's just they're not aware. Right. It's just the lack of awareness. So one side is like, we're posturing because we don't want anyone to feel a certain way, versus the posturing is not going to help you connect like the real honest stuff would.
Right.
And so I just think it's not intentional. It's just lack of awareness. So one side is like posturing for that reason. The other side is not knowing how to. And that's where like you guys come in to be able to help. Like they're like, I don't know how to say this. I don't, know, and to be able to guide that.
Yeah, maybe speak to that, Catherine, with some of the consulting that you've done with some of our clients, just in terms of guiding them to find that magic place, right? Like when do you proactively say something, or when you reactively say something?
It kind of starts with like what Nikki was saying. We can't actually teach people to care. They have to care.
Yeah.
But what we can teach them is we can remind them that they have to communicate that they care.
Right.
Yeah.
So if their heart is in it and they are ready to focus on that, then what we can do is we can help them do it more effectively. So, what are words that could be more meaningful to people versus something that feels like jargon, or something that feels like just corporate speak, right? We want to help them understand that.
Right.
We're forever telling our clients, use fewer words. It's really not about quantity, it's about quality, and thinking that through.
Simple is better.
Exactly. And just speak in normal terms. Don't use words like utilize when you can just say use.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's a silly example, but
no, it's good.
that kind of thing that we just need to bring it back to conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And have it feel like it's very genuine and authentic, right?
Absolutely.
Like you don't want to have the person who's delivering the message use words that they wouldn't normally use. So so there's that balance there.
Yeah. The one other side of this is, I think we've touched on this before. Part of the whole like Loving Mondays content that I did for a long time was, we have to own it as individuals too. So every leader is also an employee, like they have a role there too. And then every employee is a team member. And so every single person has their part. And I think that, you see sometimes so much heaviness gets put on, the leadership team. I mean, whatever. And it's like, but what are you doing?
Right.
And so it's a joint effort in that. And I think a lot of that is understanding just, why are you here? Like, why did you choose to be here, and recentering that in that a lot as an individual. And working to figure out like your highest level of engagement opportunity. And if you aren't in a leadership role, proactively asking that leader that is probably struggling, because 69% are, telling them what you need and advocating for yourself, versus like, they've never asked me for a one-on-one. Ask them for a one-on-one. Be the leader, right? Be the change you want to see.
Right.
And so I think we kind of forget that too sometimes, that all of us have a role as an individual, like micro meso, macro, and each of us has a micro role in this. So
I remember I attended a session with you and Amy Woodall, our mutual friend.
Yeah.
And she's got a podcast
Yes.
on the People Forward Network.
Yes.
It's called Conscious Habit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And she spoke about owning your 50.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're talking about.
That's right.
Like, what is my role in this and how can I make something better versus just complaining about it?
Totally.
Yeah,
that's where that phrase came from. Yes, but I love it.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about culture. I mentioned it earlier, and I feel like some of this is because of some of the podcasts and the programs that I've either participated in recently. All of the leaders or all of the people, that I've listened to or had relationship with, in small groups or whatever, feel like they're in the same place in terms of we want to have a culture where it's, we have trust and honesty and authentic communications and all of that. And so I guess I just want to delve into that a little bit about culture building and how that plays into this whole people first, how making people feel like they can be themselves in an environment where they're also working and pursuing their passions.
Yeah.
How much of a role does culture play?
I think it's huge. And I do like to share that, just to remember that culture is there even if you're not working on it.
Exactly.
It's everything has a culture. The gym we go to, the restaurant we're going to maybe go to tonight, right? It's the vibe. I like that word for it. And you think of what is it that builds a positive, uplifting vibe that helps you to want to be yourself, that helps you to want to be proactive and talk to your leader because you want to stay there. I think there's a lot of components to that. I think clear communication and relationship building is a huge one. To reiterate that, I think that developing people, like people seeing that, I'm not just here to get something done. Mm-hmm. I am getting things done and I'm learning and growing in the process too. And that, I'm seen and I'm heard. And so there's, when you have a lot of employees, you got to figure out a way to scale that and help each person, like through the leaders, to feel that. And it is complex, but we need that mix of getting pats on the back, getting opportunities to elevate, and very clear, transparent communication, celebrating together, and we talked about isolation a minute ago and how many, workplaces right now, because maybe they are more remote or hybrid, don't have the opportunities to bring people together. And you think culture, it's like, we can't just always just sit on Slack and not have time together, online or offline. It
has to be intentional.
Yeah. So I think it's a huge part.
Yeah.
Did you want to comment on that, Catherine?
Just something I would add to that is, I think, two things: repetition and modeling. We have to, as leaders, model what we want, and we have to continue to repeat ourselves. Just about the time we're tired of talking about something, or we're tired of, hearing about the same thing, that's about the time people start to really have it sink into who they are. So we can't be afraid to repeat ourselves. We can't be afraid to be consistently talking about the same things that are important to us, talking about our purpose. Write a mission statement, but don't file it away. We've got to pull it out. We've got to talk about it. We've got to relate it back to our customers, our clients, the way that we do our work. Just constantly repeating that, I think, is so important if you really want it to stick and become part of who you are.
I love those too. Both of those, modeling the way and that repetition. There are statistics out there about, like, isn't it like you've said it 7 times before they
really hear it.
Yeah. And how many times do you hear people say, but we put out an email about this?
Right.
But remember, only 37% of people read your email.
They also need to hear the podcast. They need to see the Twitter feed or whatever it is.
And I say that in light, like, I'm not poking fun. I'm like, it's like, as a whole of humanity, we all do, like, I do this. I do it on my team where I'm like, but guys, we said this last week on the meeting, and I've been thinking about it for how long? So to me, it's old news. And so.
Well, and people process so differently. I know I'm a processor, so I really do need to hear something multiple times. I need to revisit it. I need to turn it around in my head for a while, and then something else will distract me. So I need to come back to it constantly, and I need people to bring me back to it a lot of times.
Yeah, totally.
So it's this cyclical thing, right? Like, in terms of, if we have authentic relational leaders, we're going to result in more engaged, informed employees. But then it's kind of, keeps going around and round. If someone wanted to insert podcasting, let's say a leader of an organization said, I see the benefits of this. I see Peterman Brothers doing this, and they're getting these results. What advice would you give someone who's either thought about it or maybe never thought about podcasting? How would or should they get started in it? Or, just your initial advice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I never thought about it like that, but this is good practice. So I would say to know the leaders who would be looking at this, whoever's going to be owning it, to know what is our end goal, why, like what is our why, and then from there breaking down like what are the core pillars that support the why that we need to make sure happen, right? So it's almost like goals, KPIs type of thing.
Sure.
There's one other thing that I was just thinking of, and it just left me. But maybe it'll come back.
No worries. Have we ever suggested podcasting to any of our clients, like as a form of connecting with their
We have actually, and typically it's been in the past tied to some very specific topics as opposed to just kind of an open-ended type of a thing. I think that's probably an important thing too, is really think through what's your strategy and kind of to your why question, the big why, but then what is it that we want to do on a regular basis? Because I think it's kind of the kiss of death if you just do 3 episodes and then you take it away. Now, I think you can do like a limited series or something like that on a particular topic or something to kind of set the stage for a really big topic. But I think that figuring out what your consistent purpose is,
commitment to it for the long term,
really important. And also not overthinking it. We've had so many clients who've wanted to really script themselves in these podcasts, and we've really talked them out of that. Just, you can do that, but it's not going to have the effect that you think that it's going to have. Totally. It really needs to be more of a conversation.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Great. Any other questions for Nikki today, Catherine? Is you thinking about the topic?
Yeah, I think just, some of the things that you've talked about today obviously are very specific to how we lead as leaders. But for those people who don't find themselves in a leadership position by title, looking at how they can build relationships, how they can lead from where they're at, how they can use communication to do that better. Any advice or thoughts on that?
Well, I think, there's a number of ways that we can get new content and inspiration and ideas. Knowing that podcasting is the number one way that humans do, there's probably a podcast out there for, this niche topic that you're looking to advance. And, that is our area at People Forward Network for, background that you and I knew each other in Rainmakers. We were all about making impact through key relationships and how when, you get in a niche swim lane, it makes it so much easier because you find the right people and connect the right dots because you're in a niche, right? People Forward Network is in the niche of, leadership, but also even skinnier leaders on a people first journey, like that really care from that angle. And then I think, where there's so many options for content on to your question of like, what can you do? It's like, what are the next few things that you want to learn? Like create a learning program for you, right? And then, hey, check out People Forward Network. Maybe we got an episode for that. And they're free and easy to use. So, or find, a book or whatever to advance that. But
peopleforwardnetwork.com, right?
Yes. That's it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. I appreciate both of you being here today, and I appreciate all of you for listening in. And we do these ShoffChats regularly. So if you have an idea for one of our upcoming episodes, please feel free to message us on our social channels. You can find us through social media, and we'd love to have you follow us as well. So again, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.